Hello and welcome to everybody to another CMO Circle webinar. Thank you for giving up some time on this incredibly hot Friday. And for those of you watching back on YouTube, you're probably out and about in the sun, and I don't really blame you. So if you are watching on YouTube, like, subscribe, all that type of stuff below, that would be really, really appreciated. So the title of today's webinar, Beyond the Billboard, turning out-of-home advertising into a long-term brand asset. Really, really exciting. And I'm going to pass you on to the two presenters in a sec. Very quick personal one from me. This is a topic that really close to my own heart, and a little bit of context for those people that don't necessarily know me. So I used to work for TaskRabbit between 2015 and 2017. So years before Daniel and his team came along, and we started doing out-of-home advertising on the tube back then. And ultimately, it felt like we were one of the initial wave of brands that did it. And those of you that are quite old, cast your mind back to that type of era. And some of you remember the prices you could get back then as well. That was cool. So it's really, really amazing to think back that the person we used to buy that media from is Mark O'Rourke, and he's still here, right? And he's still buying media for TaskRabbit. And lots of those businesses from back then, they're not really advertising as much as they used to be, right? They've merged with other companies, or they've done other things, or they've all sorts of stuff have happened. So felt very romantic to see that campaign out there, still out there, very close to my own heart. And I mentioned this on This Week and had lots of ex-colleagues reaching out, really, really delighted for that as well. So nice personal thing of that for me to share as well. So welcome on board. I'm going to introduce our two speakers. I'm firstly going to introduce Daniel, and then after that, he's going to pass on to Mark to talk about what they're going to be talking about today, their presentation. So if I pass to you, Dan, to give yourself a quick intro, and then you pass on to Mark, who can give his intro and then share his slides, and then we'll get going. So over to you, Dan. Thanks a lot.
Good stuff. Thanks, James. Yeah, so I'm Dan, or Daniel. I've been with TaskRabbit now for about 5 years. I've been in the marketing industry for over 15 years, and my role spans sort of different sectors and industries. I started out actually running marketing in FMCG across Unilever, Pernod Ricard. My role gradually evolved as digital marketing became more important, and it's sort of taken that step and stride to stride in the digital sphere ever since. And with that, my roles also spans performance marketing and brand marketing, and now I'm heading up European marketing at TaskRabbit. So I will hand you over to Mark and let him intro himself.
How are you all doing? And thanks for turning up on a very hot day. I was hoping for rain, so everyone had sent their Oasis tickets back, but that plan's gone out the window. I might have to get some grappling hooks and a bit of rope. But anyway, my background. I've been working out of home for about 20 years, and well, longer than that actually, but for the last kind of 15 years, exclusively with scale-up brands, underdog brands, brands that haven't got the most amount of money in the marketplace. I won't tell you too much now because I'll go straight into the slides because there's an order to all this stuff. But great to meet you, and hopefully you're in safe hands today. TaskRabbit, from hidden gem to household name, and it's been a journey. And this story is all about what can happen if you put effective out-of-home advertising at the centre of your marketing strategy. And I think that the key word here, and the word doing all the heavy lifting, is effective out-of-home advertising, because you don't need me or anyone else for that matter to sit here on a webinar and tell you how to do outdoor advertising. Anyone can do it, anyone can buy it, anyone can sell it. And if you wafted a brief out the window tonight with a sniff of advertising cash, by the time you get home, you'll probably have 50 advertising sales reps stood in your front garden. So today is about doing none of that. It's about stopping, it's about taking your time, and it's about working through the process that will actually give out-of-home advertising the chance to be successful. Okay. And I've built it around the theme of 7 C's. And for the kind of eagle-eyed amongst you, you'll probably see that there's 8 C's. And the reason for that is we start with a challenge and then we end with a challenge, because it's always a challenge. It'll be different, it'll be bigger, it'll be smaller, it'll be different depending on what kind of organization you work for. But you know what? There's always going to be a challenge. And for the last kind of 15 or so years working with these types of brands, I've seen every single type of challenge solved using out-of-home advertising. But when I say out-of-home advertising, I don't mean off the shelf out-of-home advertising. I don't mean something that you ring up, do it, and add it to your mix or anything like that. I'm talking about out-of-home advertising that excels at either all or most of the C's that we've got in this slide. And today's all about how TaskRabbit did most of it consistently excellent type thing. All right. So you're probably asking why I've got a random slide of Echo and the Bunnymen stroke women. And the reason for that is Echo and the Bunnymen, I like Echo and the Bunnymen for a start. And Echo and the Bunnymen sing a song called Seven Seas. I won't sing it because it's very sunny outside and I don't want to spoil the weather. But I've put it in because this campaign has shown and demonstrated the value of tapping into nostalgia, tapping into things that you already know and just giving them a slightly different spin. And it's all about the power of tapping into things that people are familiar with, and using that to get your message across. So hopefully after today, when you're ever struggling with your out-of-home advertising, you'll open a window and you'll hear the dulcet sounds of Seven Seas from Echo and the Bunnyman waft through the window, and that'll be able to help you do your out-of-home advertising. So I know Dan's done his introduction and I've given you a little bit of an introduction. But the other thing that I would like to say is when I worked at a media company, I had a really strange role. I had carte blanche to do anything with anything that wasn't currently being used. So I kind of one of the words used to describe it was a bit Womble-esque. And if you remember the Wombles, they were famous for making good use of things that other people had ignored or left behind. And I thought that's a really good thing to start on because, do you know what? If you're going to get into an auction with the most popular sites on the most popular days, and you're going to go up against some of the biggest brands, they're probably auctions that you don't want to win. The value and the upside in any of this is finding all of those opportunities and spaces and audiences that nobody's actually found and then adding value to them. And when James was saying there, right back at the start, this technique was used to launch and grow most of the big brands around at that time. You'll have remembered them, your Made.com, your HelloFresh, your Treatwell, TransferWise, all brands like that. And they were all hugely, hugely successful. But the one that stands out most of all, out of all of them, was Vitality Health. For a couple of reasons. Firstly, when I went in and they told me they were going to be advertising with a sausage dog, I thought they were mad. So shows you what I know, and I learned a hell of a lot from it. And once you've seen distinctive brand assets take a brand from a place where they had zero brand search and were having to compete at £30 per click up against lots of other bigger brands, to a place where they were getting 23, 24, 25,000 brand searches a month for less than £1, that kind of stuff stays with you. And you think, right, well, if that can happen for one brand, then that should be happening for everyone that you're working with. So that explains the Womble and the sausage dog. Okay, if you take one thing from today as well, it's this. It's if Buster Douglas can do it, who was the biggest outsider ever to win anything in history. I'm actually questioning that now because I searched it and it came back at 42-1, but I'm pretty sure Leicester were 100-1 at some stage. But anyway, if Buster Douglas and Leicester City can do it, then anyone can do it. But here's the thing, with outdoor media, out of home advertising, whether you think it's just a part of your mix, just the same as everything else, or whether you think it can play the starring role to upset all the odds, whether you think it is or it isn't, you're probably right. What you've got to do is you've got to believe that it can, and you've got to do all of these steps to make sure that it does. Okay. So let me start by saying it's a really, really popular campaign, but do you know what? Like with most things in life, you can't please all of the people all of the time. So there was loads and loads of these, but I searched through and I found this particular exchange, which I thought was funny. This guy, called Guy, funnily enough, came online, and he didn't care about this campaign that much that he had to keep coming back and commenting on it. So it was like these posters should give convincing reasons to use TaskRabbit. These are just poor puns. And then it goes on, and then Guy comes back at the end and he says, "This it's just very poor." So Guy, he literally can't let it go. But you know what? That's fantastic, because it means that the campaign has been noticed. He's paid attention. He's remembered it. He's discussed it. He's shared it, and all of that stuff increases your reach. So can't please all the people all the time, but if you can make enough of them feel something most of the time, then it's happy days. And even though we've got people that don't like it, we've got more than a fair share of supporters that come online and then support the campaign, even within threads where they might have to take a bit of grief from dyed-in-the-wool creative agencies that think that it should be a can golden line winner or something like that. Sorry, I've just got a call coming through on my headphones. So that's online, but even in real life, there was a client that I was dealing with, and it was really interesting, this, because it shows you how outdoor works. She said, "Oh my God, I didn't know you had anything to do with the TaskRabbit ad." She said, "I went round London for ages, and I kept talking about saying the words on the posters," and she was going, "Snap back to reality, fill the wall cavity." Whew, that should be a song. And then when she heard the song, it was like a penny drop moment. She went, "Oh my God, they're all songs." So once she had this penny drop moment, she shared it with her friends. All of her friends, every time there's new lines, they all ring each other and they all sing the lines. And the last thing before moving on is on my son's first day at university. He went to Manchester Met, and on his first day, there was a load of lads turned up in the common room, and they went, "I love Manchester. It's absolutely brilliant. All the buses are driving round with Oasis lyrics on them." And it was fantastic, because they were even singing the made up Oasis lines. So it was like, "Stop frying your parts out," and stuff like that, which I'll come to later on. So you know what? Being great on LinkedIn is fantastic, but real world love beats it all day long, and this campaign has had it in spades. Okay, so coming back to kind of where did it all begin? TaskRabbit have been around since 2013. They've done plenty of out-of-home advertising in the past, and do you know what? It was all right. It was good. The posters were some decent creative, and you'll see from all of the posters that they did that they're okay. You wouldn't look at them and go, "Oh my God, they're terrible," or anything like that. And it was doing a job. It had gotten to a place where, even though new entrants were coming into the marketplace, TaskRabbit was still doing okay versus people spending a hell of a lot of money. However, we faced a challenge, and the challenge was that, as you can see from all of these bits of creative, and when you zoom in and you look at the messaging's strong, but every time they were doing a different campaign, the creative changed. So this left Dan facing a number of challenges, which I'll let Dan speak now. But Dan, what were some of the major challenges you faced when you joined the business?
So I guess when I joined, despite the years in which we'd invested in brand to some extent, we actually still had low awareness levels, and that can be a culmination of things. And I think, as Mark was alluding to here, you've got different types of creative. There's a bit of a thread, but ultimately they're all going in different directions. And kind of that links to a second challenge which I encountered, which was everything was being driven by the US team. So much so when I arrived, the website was in US English, and I was changing Z's to S's in different cases. So it was to that extent in which it was very US centric and US heavy. So that was kind of one of the first challenges, was really sort of stepping away from, I guess, what the US perceived as the right way to do things and run things. Another factor really as well is, as much as we started advertising and, started to build the brand around 2013, even today, there's a job to be done around marketplaces to educate and to build trust. Marketplaces aren't a simple thing to gather, and you've got to sort of appeal to your target audience, but then think about, okay, well, where's the disposable income? Who are the ones that will adopt the tech and understand it in the right way? So there's lots of things happening at once, which also then falls into the creative challenge. And then also we've got a lower share of marketing voice versus some of our competitors. So if you actually look at the competitive landscape, we can look at some of our direct competitors, but you can take some of your, I guess, bigger companies like Trade, where you're looking at, I guess, more full-scale housing redevelopments that even if they're not a direct business model competitor, they're still a competitor and they're still competing for that same share of voice as we are. So there's some of the, I guess, the top ones for now, in which I'll share, and we'll probably go into some of them a little bit more.
Fantastic. Cheers, Dan. And I think the main thing is, people on this webinar and CMOs and anyone in marketing really, this isn't about teaching anyone how to suck eggs. All of this stuff isn't a secret. You'll see big brands doing this all of the time. You'll see System One, you'll see Mark Ritson putting loads of stuff on LinkedIn all day, every day, and it's all really fantastic stuff. The challenge that you've got with any of this is that most of it is aimed at big brands with lots of cash. So when they're talking about share of voice, that's fantastic, great, yeah. You can spend 2.5 times the amount of everyone else in your marketplace and you'll grow your market share. But if you're up against people that are spending serious cash, how on earth do you do that? And firstly, how on earth do you do that in years to come? Never mind as a test when you've never done it before, you're a new brand and all these kind of things. So the first thing to do was to kind of go, do you know what? We have got a load of challenges and we need to make this work with all of the constraints that we're actually facing. So I suppose the next question for yourself, Dan, is what were some of the biggest constraints that you faced?
So I think, like many people on this webinar will empathize with, budget is always going to be one. I think when you think about out of home, you think it has to be multi-million pound or dollar, which I typically deal with investment. So budget is definitely one, and it's always going to be one. And you have to kind of squeeze the lemon for all it's worth and kind of get the most out of it. And that's where sort of myself and Mark work really kind of closely together to see, how we can invest in the best way in which we can get the best return on that investment. I think something that I alluded to before was the legacy of producing everything in the US. And really, this is something that I was campaigning for. I was actually the first European marketing hire at TaskRabbit, pretty very soon after James, I guess. But it was very early days. There wasn't anyone sort of full-time. It was kind of done on a contracting basis. So really, it was about starting to turn the tide and kind of educate the US team and make them understand sort of why we have to sort of shift our way of thinking things. And that's something that's evolved over time. And I would say also the final one, which was kind of culturally in the business, which I guess is the same for so many other businesses, is we are a performance driven, and we're kind of I guess at we're at the culmination of how data can be so easily extrapolated and easily now taken to really understand how is something performed, that it's hard to then prove and try and educate why we need to start investing in brands, because there is a risk component. So it was starting to shift from, okay, we need to achieve short-term immediate results, but also build long-term sustainable impact through brands. So this was the turning of the tide, I would say.
Cheers, Dan. So I've put in here, and this is like a personal journey that I've been on. And it's like when Dan joined the business, the first job was the first meeting that we had, and I remember it vividly. It was like, what do you want from out of home? And he was like, well, I want to grow the business. I want to make TaskRabbit famous. I want to do great advertising. I want to win awards, but I want it to be effective. I want it to supercharge all the different elements of my marketing mix. And it was like, right, okay, well, that having that ambition is really, really important, because unless you do have that ambition, then you're always stuck thinking okay is okay. And the reason I've got two bottles of wine here is there was a long time I didn't drink red wine. And then someone introduced me to it, and I could go really deep on this in terms of I used to hate red wine, and then someone said it's because of the acidity. Anyway, so someone gave me a low acidity wine, and I went, "Oh my God, that's really, really nice." And I was happy as Larry drinking me 19 Crimes, and then I've suddenly ended up at a place where I'm buying this Amarone wine, which I think is absolutely the nicest wine that I'll ever taste. But it's a journey. And you don't just go from your 19 Crimes to buying the top of the range bottle of Amarone. It's about having the sense that there's better out there. So I suppose the question to yourself, Dan, would be what was the ambition from not so much the business, but talk to me about your ambition for where you wanted to go with the campaigns.
Yeah, I think, broadly, just having a little bit more control. I think, it was also the timing of which I joined TaskRabbit, and kind of having that ability to, say, impose myself, but give a little bit more direction as to where I thought we could go. And, really it was just making the brand feel really, really local. This is the typical Silicon Valley tech company. And I wanted it to feel like this was coming out of the UK if we were advertising in the UK. And as you'll see later, we've now done it in France, we've done it in Germany, but it had to feel local. I didn't want it to come across as an American company imposing itself, which sometimes you can feel from a lot of other brands. So ultimately, it was to feel like hyper local. And we got to a stage of hyper local, even in the way we did our earlier tests, which we'll talk about later. So that's something that we wanted to do. I wanted to build, and I'm continuing to try and build TaskRabbit as a household name. And you wouldn't believe, like, even, since 2013, there's still a massive, massive way to go. There's so much more to be done. And I think as everyone is becoming acclimatized, I think, to using the marketplaces, because there's so many emerging, I think is actually in our favor. And our competitors are also helping build the category with us. But ultimately, it was to build a famous brand, a household name, and just, I ultimately wanted to TaskRabbit to feel cool. I wanted it to feel like, oh, you have to use TaskRabbit to get stuff done around you. It is the place to go.
Fantastic. I know, and I suppose you've got to have that ambition, or you just don't reach out and get there. And I think using this tenuous wine example is you don't go straight from a £10 bottle to a £50 bottle. You find something that is a beautiful first step that shows you the value of how great this journey can be. And oh my God, this bottle of wine is amazing. It's absolutely fantastic. It's only 15 quid in Costco. I don't get any commission, but it's a great wine. So the first step for us with doing any kind of out of home was to generate confidence. Because without the confidence, none of the rest happens. So so in terms of building that confidence, Dan, what was the first steps for yourself in terms of your internal conversations and things like that?
So yeah, I mean, to really start building the confidence, ultimately, like for many businesses, you want to dip your toe in the water, you want to start doing testing. So there's ways in which we approached it from the creative side, which was, running some testing on Meta, Facebook at the time, probably, to try and start showing and proof out that actually moving towards a more like local model where we started to have ads that really felt local and appropriate to the market could start to actually improve conversion and get more clicks. That was kind of number one. And I think we spoke about it before, the shift away from being US centric, similar kind of point, but it was a big thing. And sometimes there's a little bit of luck that you have to have in a way. And I'm not saying I've had bad leadership in any case, but I've seen this transition. I've had two CEOs, multiple marketing heads of marketing in the company, some of which may be shared with James. And some people get it more than others, I would say, and some people kind of have the knack or hunger to want to test in the brand sphere. So there is that, but also even if that's not the case and you have a leader who's maybe a little bit risk averse and not wanting to invest in brands, I think it's definitely possible to start building the case. And that comes with starting small and starting to expand, which I think we'll come on to later.
Yeah, I think, it's like anything. If you're crossing a minefield, you don't want to blow your leg off with the first step. And it's if you don't get the success and the momentum in the short term, it's very difficult to kind of
I'd,
do a long-term plan.
I'd also just want to say, sorry, Mark, one other thing which I think I'm sure many people can relate to is if we looked at our performance marketing, and I think if a lot of marketers are honest with themselves, you can very quickly get to a point of diminishing returns. Then it depends what product you're selling, right? But if you look at the margins and if, depending on sort of how big your margins are and how much room you've got to play with, you might get to a point of negative ROAS on some of your performance marketing. So ultimately, then it's a case of, okay, where are we going to go? We're going to accept that's going to continue to reduce, or we're going to think a little bit more outside the box. And kind of that was the play to then say, right, we need to build long-term sustainable growth. Yes, building the brand, investing in out-of-home is a component, but there are other channels that sync well with that, right? Thinking about SEO, the landscape of SEO has changed massively now with LLMs, the impact of AI, right? But there's so many points that kind of go together, but it's about educating to drive long-term sustainable growth and not just think what is happening now at this point in time.
So, and so the first step on this journey was we needed somewhere that was like a bit of a microcosm of a bigger place. So it had to be big enough to matter and small enough for us to show up looking like what we know works for all of the big brands. So as you can see from the map, our first step was Clapham. So Dan, what made you choose Clapham?
So I don't live in Clapham and I've got no affinity to Clapham. I'm in northwest of London. But why Clapham? So Clapham has happened to be one of those where we were looking at postcode level data. Like I said before, we have a wealth of data, a ton of it, going down to postcode level, understanding where people are booking tasks on our platform. And typically in Clapham, we saw decent penetration in terms of booking, decent conversion. So we know that supply was in a good place. So it felt like a logical step, and audience-wise, it aligned with our target audience quite well. And, that's a reflection of the results we saw in this particular postcode. So I think as well, working together with Mark, like we had a budget and it was a tight budget, right? It was not big by any means necessary. And I didn't even think we'd be able to do out of home with that budget. But I think working together, what we wanted to do is find a place particularly around sort of the Clapham Common Station, whereby we could test around the big format and we could also try and get a sense of domination to some extent. And then kind of controlling that, we'd be able to see what the results would be through the funnel, primarily focusing on the top of funnel, but looking at things through the funnel. So by doing that, we were able to test and see, okay, in that isolated control group, what kind of shift could we start to make?
And so the first iteration on this journey is doesn't look like all of the current creative. There won't be people sharing it for years to come, and it probably won't win any awards, but this is the most important campaign out of everything, because if you don't do enough with the first campaign, it's very difficult to build the case to go on the scaling journey that works. So what did we have to do? We were on a tight budget, but just because you've got a tight budget doesn't mean you do something that you know doesn't work. We had to try and replicate all of the things that we saw in the slide earlier. We had to show up, dominate share of voice, build decent frequency, make sure that we gave the impression of being absolutely everywhere. And tapping into Dan's point there about being local, out of home's really strong on that. So if you see it on buses, on bus stations, you perceive it to be a local company anyway. And what this campaign did, it ensured that we were in front of about 60-70% of all adults all across Clapham and the surrounding area. We dominated the hubs and the bottlenecks, so the stations, the tube stations, the escalators. And we made sure that I think the frequency was above 10. So people saw it again, saw it again. It was a really, really strong frequency. And you know what? The results, well, they were good enough. And with any kind of campaign, all of this stuff is, I was going to put a quote in, but then I couldn't find who the quote was from. I think it was from Stephen King, but it could have been from Tolstoy, because we're reading two books at the same time. And it was like, one of them said, "What's the purpose of a great novel?" And the purpose of a great novel is to get you to turn the page. That's it. Because unless you can turn the page, you'll never get to the last page and you'll never even read the novel. And it was exactly the same with the Out of Home, in terms of the results were great. I'll let Dan speak about them in a second. But we waited, we planned, we made sure that when we did it, all of the wind and all of this was at our back and the stars were aligned. So we gave ourselves the best chance. So Dan, would you like to share a few of the particular details and results of the campaign?
Yeah, of course. So I think, with this particular test, as Mark said, good enough was enough, luckily in this instance. And I think, not to say that we were surprised, right? There's obviously going to be a risk factor. This, in an ideal world, was not the approach that I would have taken, doing an isolated out of home, kind of maybe, I think it was max like 3 postcodes, but centered around Clapham Common. We knew that was not the best use of money, but it was a route that we had to take to try and sway and turn the tide and get people on board with doing something much bigger. Bearing in mind, I would say, prior to that, we were around 95% of our budget was being spent on performance marketing. So that's kind of like the scale of which we're at with the investment in brand. So results wise, I think, it was amazing to see the top of funnel growth fundamentally. We saw an uplift in traffic and it was quite immediate, which was interesting. But what was also really interesting was the kind of immediacy of the bottom of funnel impact. And we actually started to see an uplift in jobs in that particular postcode. And with TaskRabbit, if you've used the platform before, in the majority of instances, you can book up to 2 weeks in advance. So it's quite hard from a measurement perspective to see sometimes the immediate result. I think as some of us say internally, like we're not necessarily selling sunglasses, so we're not doing an ad in which people will come. It's not an impulse product. It's something that you really need to think about and consider. So to actually interrupt someone's journey, interrupt someone's thought process, and sway them to then think, you know what, I actually have something I need to get done around the house. We saw the jobs getting booked and come in, which was really great to see. And then, ultimately, if those results were replicated across London, then we knew that out of home could do the things that we wanted it to do. And in time, we had to give it at least 6 months. We looked at our aided awareness score, which is something that we measure alongside unaided. So aided would be, mentioning the TaskRabbit name in terms of thinking about particular skills like, handy people, for example. And we saw growth in aided awareness too. So it was really hitting from every single angle.
Fantastic. And right, okay. So we'd got the ball rolling. We'd got the ball rolling, and once we had the momentum, what we then needed to do was prepare to scale. And the reason I put this poster in is not just because James is on it, looking fantastic there, going down, doing what anyone would do, go down and look at your campaign on the first day. It's the analogy that I use for this is that preparing for scale means that you've got to get everything that you need for the journey that you're going to make. So it's a bit like you wouldn't climb a climbing wall in a gym and then go and climb a mountain in the Alps, because they're two different things. And the last place that you want to figure out that you've took the wrong socks is halfway up the east face of the Eiger. And it's very similar with the out of home stuff. You don't want to get halfway into the journey or down the path of paying for this, paying for that, doing this, doing that, and realizing that you've got the exact same color as your main competitor, or you're saying the same message, or you're not allowed to be on that particular media channel. This all starts with the planning, the preparation, everything like that being done right at the start. So what we needed to do was, coming back to the sausage dog, is we needed to find our very own sausage dog, our own distinctive assets. So I suppose, Dan, what were you looking for from the creative right at the start?
Many things, I think, from the creative, and I think this is arguably the most important thing because, if you've got, I don't know, a Ferrari, you put the wrong fuel into it, it's not going to go anywhere. So I'm a big advocate for making sure that the creative's right, because otherwise you're just throwing money at things that just aren't going to fly. So from the creative sense, I think some of the key things were memorability. I think, like I said, with our platform, you can book up to 2 weeks in advance. So we needed to be sticky. We needed to stick in the consumer's mind. And particularly if we're going to catch them on a commuting journey, which is where, a lot of our ads were based around the tube, the underground. So we had to make sure that it would be memorable in many different ways. Breakthrough, I think, everyone wants something to be breakthrough and completely different. I think the truth of the matter is, I think, as Mark and I joke about, is like everyone's done some kind of pun or something on the underground. You cannot escape for a pun on the underground, but there's different ways of doing things, and I think it's still possible to break through in a different way. Humor as well. I think, TaskRabbit could arguably go into the emotive space, and I think brands have a decision to make. As they're starting to do advertising, we continue to talk, do we want to be emotive or humor? And I personally, this is my bias, like I love falling into the humor space. I think, so many people have got so many things going on in their life. I think sometimes just lifting up the mood also helps with memorability too. And to put a smile on someone's face, I think is invaluable. The other things were around relevance, so culturally relevant. I think this was, one of the stepping stones to move away from something that was US centric to do something that would, really resonate with that local audience. I think that's what I see from a lot of brands advertising in the UK. It appeals to the nuance, whether it's making fun of English weather or, whatever it might be. Like out of the US, you just kind of wouldn't get that. You wouldn't be able to tap into that kind of humor. Another factor too, I think, we'd not so long ago changed our brand world, developed the kind of the color palette, and we kind of got this agave green that we kind of call it now. And we needed some level of consistency. We spoke about it before, like we had different iterations, different shades of green. There were kind of some similarities, but I wanted like a strong grounding point where this green would at least cover a certain percentage of that poster. So there'd then be something to build on for consistency.
Fantastic. And I think that it's important to say that, that you were already in this kind of space. And this is like a lyrics campaign 1.0, is it? Or whatever they say. But I think it kind of it goes to show that, they were already kind of playing around with these ideas, so the next step, and again, it comes back to going, is it okay or can we do better? Because it was at this stage that Dan was kind of going, well, do you know what? We'll get other experts into the conversation and we'll hone it. We'll hone it to within an inch of its life. So we've got something that we're really happy to kind of take on a bit of a journey with. So I mean, what kind of made you look out of the business, Dan? What kind of things underpin that?
I could just see the value in working. So at this point, the focus for the out home, for focus on building the brand as a starting point, was in the UK and more specifically London, where the majority of our advertising was concentrated. And I just saw and knew there would be value working with a UK-based agency who gets, like I said, the cultural relevance, the nuances, what makes the UK and what makes London the way it is, because you'll see kind of later, like we didn't necessarily do a copy and paste taking this campaign from London to Manchester. I'm from Manchester, so I was actually quite proud of the fact that, I was like, okay, well, we can kind of take it from one place to another and do it a bit differently. So that was really fun. And I think kind of looking to partner with an agency, and in this case, it was with Noise Media. I felt that they understood where I was kind of coming from in terms of what I wanted to achieve and to make it feel locally relevant.
Fantastic. Okay, and so to give you a little bit of a trot through the process, there was so many great ideas. It's one of the deck from Noise Media, one of the best decks I've seen. It was absolutely fantastic. But I remember the feeling of when this popped up last night. A DJ saved my pipes, and it just made me chuckle. made me laugh. And I'm a hard person to make laugh. So I was like, oh my God, that kind of state. And I came back to it and I showed my wife and I thought it was fantastic. So that was the clear winner. But what I also have to do from the media planning and buying perspective is it has to be practical. So is it legal? Will it run? Are we on safe ground? Is anybody else doing it? Does it match the colours? Will it fit on different formats? And what you'll see here is the bottom one's Germany. Then you've got that bottom one's Germany underground. The other one's above ground in London. That's on a tram in Germany. That's on a tram in London. We've got buses in Manchester, buses in Bristol, and it works. And you've seen it on all of the different formats. It works on all of the different formats. So, and from almost like an advantage perspective, it gives us the opportunity to pounce on opportunities, knowing that we can turn things round really, really fast. So, so that's why we chose that particular one. And once we had the creative, it was then a question of going, all right, how do we go to market? And I think one of the biggest mistakes I've seen over the years that young brands and big brands make is they try and do too much with too little. So they'll do a campaign, they'll say, we've got nationwide coverage, and they'll try and do nationwide advertising. And what it ends up being, I heard someone describe it as being a little bit like a mile wide and an inch deep. It's kind of nothing. It's almost like walking into football grounds and whispering while there's a match going on and saying, oh, great, we've targeted football fans. When you've got limited resources, it's always best to really knuckle down. And we did it on the creative style, we did it on the channel, we did it on the format, and we did it on location. And the reason that we chose London as the location, I suppose one of the big reasons I always advocate it is you could be the top brand in the world in Middlesbrough or Rochdale or whatever, and you're not making much impact on the marketplace. And it's like, just the example I use is when I was at Camp Bestival, there was a typhoon and it wrecked every single tent down there. There was nothing left. And I came home and nobody was interested. And the following couple of weeks, there was a bit of rain at Glastonbury and it was on the 6 o'clock news. So it's really important that if you've got limited resources and you want to make the most of them, you have to do it in the place where it will matter the most. So does that kind of cover it from a London perspective, Dan? But I mean, what were your thoughts on kind of not going everywhere because you had taskers everywhere? What was the London choice?
Yeah, I think, like I said before, budget was a constraint, and it was also thinking about resource. So to really sort of make as big a bang as possible, we wanted to focus on the most important metro for us in the UK, which was London. It was the biggest in terms of demand and also the most aggressive in terms of commercial results that were needed. And I think also London, as many of you all know, it's also about the environment. It's not easy. It's not a cookie cutter type approach. You can't copy and paste the approach. Everywhere is different. Even the types of media of out of home, like the level of the tube penetration, that doesn't exist in Manchester. Yeah, there's tram ads, but it's not the same. So you have to think about people differently by metro. But this definitely just made the most sensible approach. And there are obvious things that, many of us were based in London, so we could go and see it live. We could go and see what's kind of happening. But ultimately, yeah, it was easier for us to kind of penetrate around London versus spreading ourselves thin.
Fantastic. Cheers. Although the markets are different, the approach can kind of like be the same. So we go in and we go in big and we make sure, tracking it all the way back to Clapham. It's when we do it, we do all the planning and we don't go in kind of with half measures. So we kind of had a load of learnings that we could apply to the different places. One of the other things that is the next C is the importance of people. And I say this because all I ever read about is AI and technology and everything like that. But in an arms race where you've got your robots fighting someone else's robots, if you've not got as much money as the other guy with his robots or their robots, her robots, it's the competitive advantage can be in your relationships and the people that you work with. And I think from start to finish on the TaskRabbit campaign, Everyone's played a part. The TaskRabbit internal team, Noise Media developing the creative, 1 minute briefs that then took that creative and then applied different lines, the media owners that we work with, the guys over in Germany that took me, before you spend a penny, and I would say this to anyone, before you spend any money on any kind of out of home, go and see what your customers will be seeing. Because when you see it, the world looks a different place. So it's like the whole approach of working with people is what gave this campaign a certain amount of secret sauce. So for yourself, Dan, how did you find it kind of works with your internal teams working with external teams? What's been the mix like? And have you got any kind of insights from that?
Yeah, I mean, we had a lot of people involved. I mean, taking this concept to or across the 3 different countries, we've got marketing managers, looking after now. I've got someone looking after the UK now that I've moved into this European position. So we've obviously gone through several phases of this. So I collaborate with them, and we have marketing manager for both France, mainly focused on Paris, but also Germany too. We've got a localization team, we have a legal team. Lots of people are involved in this, and a lot of educating needed to be done. I don't think my legal team maybe would have approved this back in the day to some extent. I think using lyrics, you are potentially approaching or breaching copyright issues, but we managed to do this in a way that we feel we've contained the situation, I would say, knocking on wood, as best as possible. But many people at play here, and then we're obviously partnering with external agencies too. So the way in which we approached it, the rounds of feedback, the right type of I guess flow, just to make sure that things moved in sort of a smooth way was critical to this. Because as Mark would say, like as well, like some of the opportunities from a media buying perspective actually came up quite last minute. So we had to be able to quickly rotate things in and out. And I think that was also the beauty of this kind of creative execution, was we can drop in a different task, or we can drop in different lyrics, and we are consciously choosing those lyrics to link to specific categories and specific moments in time. So multiple things at play.
Fantastic. And the next C is, do you know what? Dan and his team from the word go never treated any of this really as a test. It was all treating it as if the life depended on it. And when you've got limited budgets, you've got to go full throttle. There's no hedging allowed, and he's kind of looked at every single angle in terms of taking the business with him, having and this is a shot there in the right hand corner of that's the TaskRabbit office wall. So all of these posters are all over the office. They've had team members come up to Manchester to do site tours of all of the buses and the assets up here, and that takes a certain level of commitment. That if you are up against it from a budget perspective, you've got to give absolutely everything. Have you got anything to add on that, Dan?
No, I'll keep you going, just conscious of time.
Okay. And then the consistency is a superpower. At every stage, there's always this niggling that, has it run too long? Are people bored of it? But the fact is, consistency, especially with out-of-home advertising, is a superpower. The example I've given is the crab stick selling man that always used to turn up to the pub at 7 o'clock on a Friday afternoon, on a Friday night. If he'd have suddenly started turning up at 5:30, wearing a pink jacket, selling ice creams or anything like that, confusion would have erupted. But for years and years and years, he made a very good living of being the crabstick man every single week. And when it comes to out-of-home advertising, you'll see it compound rather than people getting bored of it. And have you found that from a feedback perspective of customers and internally, Dan?
Yeah, I think it's kind of always the case, with creative, there's a tendency to get bored of it internally, because we've done so many phases of this, and you feel like, what's happened maybe over a year felt like it's been over like 5 years, and you kind of always want to keep things fresh. But actually, from an external perspective, people aren't getting bored, and we are trying to twist it up and shake it up and keep it in perspective. So I think it's always good to sort of hear that consumer feedback and evolve in that direction, and not be so internally focused.
Fantastic. And I suppose from a purely media and media planning and buying, it allows us to execute at the click of a finger. You know, opportunities come up, and hopefully this will be running later on this evening on digital screens all across Manchester, as like 70,000 Oasis fans are walking around the place. So it's if you had to go through all of the planning process and everything like that, it wouldn't happen. So I'm out later on. I've not got a ticket, unfortunately, but I will have my camera and I will be part of proceedings. So what I'll do is I'll make sure that I share them with everyone in this call so you can see them in the flesh. And then it ends with the challenge, because you know what? Like I say, they never go away. And even though this is a fantastic campaign, it's not without its challenges. You know, where do we go from here? How do we go on to different advertising channels? How do we take it into audio but still stay on the right side of legal and everything like that? I mean, what are some of the challenges that you're facing, Dan?
Yeah, I think ultimately, we want to continue to do out of home, but we want to sort of make this a fully integrated campaign, and we want to build on the successes that we've seen. So, with the lyrics campaign, it can be a little bit tricky to apply to radio and TV. You can get stuck in a little bit more around the licensing laws and thoughts around that. And you kind of almost want to go out on a high. So we kind of need to establish, when is the right point to move on from this kind of creative outlet and move on to something a little bit different. So there are a number of challenges. We want to continue to invest in this. And I think I said it earlier, we might start to see diminishing returns in terms of the output. So we need to be conscious of that and adapt as we see fit.
Fantastic. So, what will the next chapter look like? Watch this space. I know I've run quite close on time, but that's it. And thank you very, very much for listening. And thanks very much, Dan, for being part of it.
Mark, Dan, absolutely fantastic. We learned so much. I am conscious of time. We've had lots of questions, and actually, you've done really well because you've answered tons of them within the slides themselves. Really, really quick one. Was there something you tried that didn't work in the campaign? You've shown us your hits. What about your misses?
Mark, or is it more the creative side?
Do you know,
There's not something that's hugely jumped out. I mean, I think we've rotated over a number of creatives. It would be hard to isolate actually because of the nature of our home to know if something was like, 4 out of 5 were good, but we intentionally rotated and kept things fresh. And we did some research internally. We also spoke to other people to get a sense of, would this, be the right hook? Would it land well? So I wish I could give you like a good nugget of information, but like there wasn't something that jumps out as a particular failure in this one.
Yeah, do you know, and it's personal choice as well, especially on the creative. My favourite was "Don't look back in anger and hire Usain." Yet I saw someone criticising it on LinkedIn. I felt wounded. I felt like going, "That's my favourite." So it's a personal choice, but in terms of how they've landed in all of the different areas, they've all landed, touch wood, very well.
Amazing. Yeah, just a quick question in. Slides will be shared. Yes. Recordings will be shared. Yes. Thank you for Nicola for doing that. One last question. I think I'm conscious so you all can sprint out into the sunshine. Like you built the brand out of home and you did some social testing. Any other channels that you used alongside to help brand build during that process as well, Daniel, alongside out of home?
Yeah, well, I mean, we've tested a number of different ones. I would say like the lyrics, we specifically briefed for this campaign to be dominant on out of home. So I would say that. So alongside that, we have run ads on social. Meta in particular, we found as one of the best. We don't typically we've not seen massive success, for example, with reach campaigns, but we do optimize our campaigns to a point in the funnel that makes the most sense for us. And I would say, we've tested alongside with YouTube. That came out in research. As you know, I think for our kind of industry, searching for how-to videos is critical. So those insights and those data points, made us want to test on those channels. Connected TV, I would say, is something that's beginning to emerge. It's a harder one to attribute, but it's something that we're also playing around with too.
Amazing. Thanks so much. Look, let's wrap it up there. I'm conscious people are going to melt, including myself. Mark, Daniel, thank you so much. It's a brilliant campaign and a great story. And I think the way you collaborated on that was really amazing. It's amazing to have the agency and the client as one telling that story. So we really thank that. If you're watching on YouTube, link to slides should be below. If not, we'll be coming back on email. We'll share Mark's details. Any questions we haven't get a chance to ask, you can ask Mark and stuff. Thank you so much for everyone that's here. We really, really appreciate you for coming to the CMO Circle webinar. And we will speak to you soon, and have a great Friday and a great weekend. We'll speak to you soon.